Good morning. Happy Thursday. I would like to start that today I've been left to my own devices. And of course, when left to my own devices, all the technology decided to break. So I was technically on time, but my camera said no. So I've spent the past 30 minutes trying to get the camera to work and it's working. So that's good. There's one win for me. Also, hopefully, y'all can hear me. I am a little bit sick and under the weather. So I'm going to try my best. Good morning, y'all. How are y'all doing? Today's Thursday, right? Today is Thursday, February 27th. I'm Stephanie of Allegedly Stephanie, and Julesy is not here. Our dearest is on her way to Trinidad, so hopefully she is having doubles for all of us and will be whining and liming to her heart's content. And now I realize I was like, wait, hold on. I'm like really close. Me being in charge of the tech is a bad idea, but we're going to make it work. All right. So I hope y'all used your imagination and pretended the music was on because I spent another 10 minutes trying to get the music and that clearly didn't work. But that's all right. We are going to tell Julesy when she comes back, when it's March, that it did work and that the non-tech person figured it out. We're just going to pretend. There are a lot of flus and different sicknesses going around. This is the second time I've been sick this year, which usually I don't get sick that often, but there's everything going around. So I hope y'all take care of yourself. Take your vitamin D and your vitamin C supplements. Saying that out loud so I remember to take mine because I have forgotten. And that's probably what led to the issue, truthfully. All right, so let me go ahead and start. Oh, I love how this is now out of order. Love that for us. That's okay. Give me 2 seconds. Oop, let me remove that background. I don't even know how I put it there, if I'm gonna be honest. Okay, here we go. Ooh, that's awful. Yay, some colors. Okay. Let me add all of our topics and then, well, bear with me 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, this will be fine. Okay, like a minute actually, if we're being honest. Oh, it only lets me do one at a time. Okay, lesson learned. We'll start with our levity of the day, which our levity today is Dochi. This is also unofficially a Dochi borderline stan account. Standing comes with very negative consequences, so I don't encourage standing for anybody. However, let's say super fan account. Let's do that. So this is Dochi in her most recent spread in the cut, and I'm excited to see that we are bringing back a good fashion spread. Yes, while fascism and dictatorship and foolery is here, at least we can resist and fight back whilst looking at something aesthetically pleasing. So I very much appreciated that. We're getting the photographers, the creative directors out, the fashion girlies, the hairstylists. And this was very beautifully done. So this is by the cut, Bow Down to Dochi, fresh off of her Grammy win. The unapologetic Florida rapper is just getting started. All right. And really, I only pulled this article for our levity of the day to really show you the fashion spread because I very much appreciated the 80s theme with a mix of Grace Jones, bravado. In this picture, I love this leotard. It's wonderful, looks beautiful, the color on her skin. I don't love these 80s shoes, these 80s style pumps, but it does go with the theme. So it does make sense. All right. Let me see. Let's scroll down a little bit more. Stunning, beautiful, very much 80s, very much I'm here to reset, to break everything. Love the corseted look. And she does a great job of using neutrals and making neutrals something more fun. As somebody who, obviously loves a lot of color and a lot of bright color, she is the one artist out right now where I'm like, you know what? Maybe I will buy a black dress eventually. Okay. And then this was the cover. Here we go here with her signature eye tape that she likes to wear, as well as this beautiful red leotard. All right, did we get through all? We didn't get through all the pictures. Again, great use of neutrals. This is also the hat is supposed to mimic hair. Excellent. This is creativity. This is giving us something new. Very versatile. Yes, to Zara's point. Very versatile, very fun. Oh, really? We'll have to look into this. Oh, no. See, we have so much background paperwork I need to do in terms of trademarking, but we're getting there. Wow. Horrific and fascinating. I will look at this when I'm not sick. The conservative version, apparently, that's going on because that will probably make me more sick. All right. So there goes our levity for today. Also recommend reading the article. It's beautiful. Okay. Now let's get into the horror, to the foolishness, and less the horror and more the straight up foolery that is, unfortunately, still the mayor of New York, Eric Adams. Let's start here. Now, it should be noted that Eric Adams is currently still, his charges are standing. So he's being charged with fraud, corruption, a host of things for allegedly and essentially taking bribes from the Turkish government to help them build an embassy here in New York. And while he did that and decided to act a plumb fool, he also took himself down to Mar-a-Lago, which is the current person who is allegedly in charge of this place, his residence, and decided to broker a deal at Mar-a-Lago for himself, which again would be further corruption. Now, the majority of the attorneys that were supposed to and were told by the Department of Justice to dismiss Eric Adams' charges, they are rightfully refusing to do so. So his team now is asking the judge to toss his corruption case, claiming prosecutorial misconduct. It should be known that Eric Adams' attorney is also Jay-Z's attorney, which is very fascinating. And I only point that out because while objectively Jay-Z has significantly more money than Eric Adams, how is Eric Adams, a alleged civil servant, being able to afford one of the best attorneys in the country? Not with the money that we are paying him as citizens of New York. Okay. So this article is from The Guardian. All right, let me make it bigger so y'all can see. Hopefully everything is running well. If it's not, let me know. It might take me a couple seconds to catch on and make sure everything is running. But we are pushing through. All right. So in papers filed in Manhattan federal court, his lawyers asked, Spiro is one of his attorneys. That's the famous lawyer that usually represents, I would say he likes to attract any type of problematic Black man that has a little bit of cash. He's representing a lot of those people. His lawyers allege that the misconduct occurred when the government publicly leaked a letter in that the U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon wrote to the Attorney General Pam Bondi explaining why charges should not be dropped. I believe as of today, at least 7 attorneys that were in charge of prosecuting Eric Adams have resigned because, again, rightfully, they refused to drop the charges, which these charges not only are valid, there's evidence to back up the crimes that he has allegedly committed, and he needs to see trial, despite the fact that he is trying to broker separate deals for himself. She wrote the letter offering to resign as she refused to follow the directive of the acting deputy Attorney General Emil Bove directive to drop the charges against the embattled mayor 2 weeks ago. Bove accepted the resignation. So we are losing attorneys in the department because they are simply trying to do their job. Bove had written a letter to Sassoon saying the mayor was needed to assist Donald Trump's law and order priorities, particularly the fight against illegal immigration and violent crime. He also said the charges were interfering with this year's New York City mayoral race. They're not. He should stand trial for his charges, have consequences for his charges, and we collectively, the whole entire city of New York, has been speaking out against him because we've wanted a new mayor for the past 2, 3, technically majority of people his whole term. In the court papers released on Wednesday, Adams' lawyers wrote that the public release of Sassoon's and, quote, unhinged resignation letter, it wasn't unhinged. It was very direct, as in, it basically stated, I'm not going to break the law to uphold a buffoon and his foolishness. Okay. The lawyers said Sassoon notified Bondi that prosecutors were planning to add an obstruction charge against Adams in a superseding indictment and made the wildly inflammatory and false accusation. It's not false. It has been confirmed numerous times. That Adams and his lawyers had offered to help the Trump administration in return for the dismissal of charges. That has been confirmed, which is very interesting that his legal team is choosing this route because essentially he doesn't really have any options because he believes that he is above the law and that he should not face any consequences. I think the chat is frozen, so hopefully everything is working. I'm watching it, but let me know. Okay, which that I would say is not the most interesting thing that's going on with Eric Adams. Eric Adams likes to be the problematic person that he is, and he will continue to fight against his charges. He also, they are trying to say that one of his aides is actually behind taking the bribes from Turkey when it was Eric Adams who is on the flight manifestos for taking all those flights, getting the free flights, etc. The most interesting thing going on with Eric Adams, in my opinion, besides the fact that he refuses to step down, is the audacity. There are very few people I think that we have ever seen that have the level of audacity of Eric Adams. And that is always surprising and always shocking to me. Let's play this
So
clip.
this is a biblical moment.
Let me back up 1 second before he gets into his biblical moment. This is the same mayor. He loves to bamboozle the elderly Black people that still go to church here in New York. Usually, a lot of his press conferences are held at churches, which is very wild. He loves to rile that one segment of the population up to basically say anything that is against him is anti-Black, even though the majority of people calling for him to resign and to face consequences are indeed Black. However, he also loves to use biblical imagery. He referred and referenced himself that he was Job. Job is one of the wilder stories in the Bible, in my opinion. And that's why at a young age, I was like, I have questions. I have questions as to why this God is so mean spirited to just put Job through all of these trials and tribulations because he wanted to make a bet with his enemy. Job is one of the wilder things. Eric Adams has likened himself to Job, saying that he's being prosecuted, that he's an upstanding person. Eric Adams is not an upstanding person. It has been alleged for the entirety of his mayoral candidacy in his mayoral tenure, actually, that he is not even a New York City resident, that he actually resides in New Jersey. He used to be the Brooklyn borough president. So Borough Hall, if you get off on the 4-5 stop, that's where his old office was. And even then, people had huge issues with him because he essentially is, I would say, like an NYPD plant. Everything that he's done with, which is taking away hundreds of millions of dollars from various funds throughout the city for social services, he has rerouted all of that money to the NYPD. It's unnecessary. It's a waste of money. This new propaganda prop of we're going to put more police officers into the subway system. They are only there to guard, to make sure you are paying $2.90 to get on the train. They are not actually in the bottom of the train where allegedly crime is occurring. No. Oh, I take some water. I need some orange juice. But on that note, this is one of the press conferences he had this week. I believe it's on the 26th. And we are going to hear, his biblical rundown really quick.
So this is a biblical moment. When Jesus was on the cross, he said, God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All these Negroes who are asking me to step down, God, forgive them.
Who is Negroes? It's the tone in which he's using the word.
Are you stupid?
There's nothing worse than an objectively stupid person asking sensible people in such a gaslighting manner whether or not they're stupid. The only stupid person is Eric Adams, who really and truly believes and has, I would say, in my opinion, the most audacity we have ever seen from a mediocre, wild, unqualified Black person. The way he acts, sometimes I wonder if Eric Adams thinks that he has the complexion for protection. And it has paid off for him for what it's worth, which is even more flabbergasting. Now, because the citizens of New York are not going to let him just ask us Negroes if we Negroes are dumb, one of, where is it? Let me find it. Here we go. A reporter and journalist actually doing their job took him to task about who the hell is he calling Negroes and who's he calling Negroes in this manner. That was the wildest thing, Angela. Of course he lives in NYC. Y'all don't recall the tour of his basement apartment? That apartment that he staged, it was also dirty. Like, how do you stage an apartment and you stage it to look so dirty? Wild. Okay. So let me play this clip from you. So Roy Wood Jr., very funny comic, stated Kirk Menefee turned the walk on and slowly slid that man down in the grease. Who are the Negroes? So shout out to Kurt Menefee. Also, his white co-anchor on the show is just sitting there so uncomfortable at this conversation, which makes this conversation even funnier. But it shouldn't be funny because Eric Adams truly believes his BS to the point where he is going back and forth as if he did nothing wrong. Can I make this a little bigger? Okay, perfect. Let me make this a little bit bigger so y'all can see this. Okay, let me play this clip. And this is from Good Day New York.
Back to an event you had at the Gracie Mansion last night, where you spoke about Black History Month, and in it you said, quote, all these Negroes who are asking me to step down, God forgive them. Are you implying that if you're Black, you have to support you?
No, not at all. I'm asking for all New Yorkers to support me.
So who are you specifically talking to when you say Negroes?
Well, who has stepped down? Who has asked me to step down? If you look at that whole speech, the speech talked about the continuation of lighting your flame and continue to light and shine. And that's what we've done in this administration with our team. So those who have called for me to allow my flame to prematurely be extinguished, that's what I'm talking about.
So you're saying all New Yorkers are Negroes?
I thought I was very clear in my definition of what I said. All New Yorkers, we got 8.3 million New Yorkers, 8.3 million people didn't call for me to step down. I get just the opposite when I'm in the streets.
Lie.
So anybody who's Black who calls for you to step down, they need help from God. I'm focusing on this because your use of the word Negro has come up repeatedly over the last couple of weeks. And I think some people actually have an issue with that term. So explain who you're talking to when you use that term specifically.
I didn't say they need help from God. I said, pray for them. Wasn't that what I said?
You said, quote, God forgive them.
Exactly. Let's pray for them. And so let's focus.
His ability to lie and twist the truth in real time, particularly when somebody is fact checking him, it needs to be studied. Again, he wants to call us the N-word is what he wants to do, but he can't do that, which is why he's trying to use Negroes as a pejorative. And it is fascinating to see that not only did this man compare himself to Jesus Christ, regardless of how I feel about the good book and organized religion, anybody comparing them to Jesus Christ, usually a megalomaniac, usually somebody who's not to be trusted, usually somebody who will likely be found out to have stolen and embezzled your funds, somebody that is trying to play in your face while they think they are above the law. And that is Eric Adams. The clip then goes on and he continues to go back and forth, which again, shout out to the journalist from Good Morning New York, Kurt Menefee, for continuing to ask him, like, okay, but who are the Negroes? Like, why are you calling us Negroes in this tone, in this overseer, Negroes, you need to leave me alone tone? It should be noted there's a huge shift now in New York. For what it's worth, the Black Democrats that are in power usually are rank and file Democrats in that they have been sticking together for decades, and there is not a huge break in that. You have Al Sharpton speaking out against Eric Adams, various members of the Black leadership speaking out against Eric Adams. That is who Eric Adams is trying to admonish and call Negroes in this way. And clearly, the more that people speak out against him, I think the more likely, hopefully, one, we need education on how, what is it called? Rank voting. Is it called rank voting? Hold on. Make sure I say it right. No. Ranked choice voting, sorry. Ranked choice voting is how Eric Adams won his seat. It was the first time when he ran 4 years ago. That was the first time in New York we ever had ranked choice voting. Without the education of how ranked choice voting works, a lot of people did not understand the ballot. So hopefully, one, this encourages people to teach everyone, like, okay, this is how the ballot actually works with ranked choice voting, so we can get rid of Eric Adams. And then two, we have people willing to realize, like, all skinfolk and kinfolk, number one. Number two, Eric Adams has only ever been for two sets of people, himself and then the NYPD. He doesn't care about anybody else. He is a former police officer, so obviously he will receive a very large pension. I think that's one of his reasons as to why he continuously embezzles money, allegedly, in my opinion, for the NYPD from other departments here in New York City. And also, he has a complex where he thinks that this is somehow a dictatorship and that he is in charge of everyone and that he should be allowed to do whatever he wants to do. So we are seeing a break in that. But yeah, that's where we're at in New York. But I am glad that people are taking him to task publicly. But as you can see, taking him to task publicly is not enough because he is delusional and he will continue to just spew whatever lie. And then obviously he knows where to go. The crowd originally where he was calling everybody Negroes, etc., that crowd was cheering him on. So he knows where to go, where people are still in favor of him, even though they have not received any benefits from his administration. So we will keep an eye on that because I'm hoping we're getting a new mayor. All right. So on to the next one. Let me go in order. What's next? Okay. We are going to talk about Ukraine. I should have brought, I thought I brought tissue in here, but I didn't. But hopefully it'll be all right. I might have to get up in a second. Okay. So this is from CNN. This is from this morning from 6:03, February 27th. Trump, Starmer at odds over security guarantees for Ukraine ahead of critical talks. Now, this tan in the lines, the goggle tan lines will never cease to give me a jump scare. This is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir, I think that's how you pronounce his first name, Keir Starmer, and this, unfortunately, is our current president in all of his dishonorable mention. One of the things we talked about on Monday was, rightfully someone pointed out that we do need to pay attention to currently what is going on in Europe with Ukraine and Russia and how that affects I would say the rest of the colonizing world. Since we do live in the United States is known to be one of the largest colonial powers that be currently in existence. And the reason for that is we see Trump now, he is very friendly, buddy, openly with Vladimir Putin, who is the 25-year, let me make sure this is correct, 25-year ruler of Russia, aka a dictator. Let's double check that. Vladimir Putin reign. Since 1999. Wow. Okay, is that double? Okay, since 1999, Vladimir Putin has served as either president or acting president or prime minister of Russia. So he has been in power the entirety of this time, and that is not because the people of Russia keep voting him in. Okay. One of the things currently going on is after Russia invaded Ukraine, Joseph Biden, our former president, took the stance that because Ukraine was an ally to the United States would basically conduct a proxy war against Russia via Ukraine and supplied with our taxpayer money, supplied Ukraine with billions of dollars of military service, weaponry, etc. We are seeing a complete 180 of that, where Trump now is stating, no, we are not going to be supplying securities, military service, etc., and essentially stating, actually, the United States should help broker a peace agreement. But in a peace agreement, what is the United States getting out of this? This has I'll say rightfully for now, for I give like my full opinion. Rightfully scared the entirety of the EU as well as England, which doesn't belong to the EU anymore, stating like, hey, if you give Russia an inch, the likelihood that they may then start colonizing other parts of Europe is a large likelihood, and why would we allow this, and you're supposed to be our ally, etc. Which is why on Monday we discussed how Macron, who is Macron the president or the prime minister of France? Hold on. Emmanuel Macron, he is the president of France. The president of France was trying to basically talk sense into Donald Trump. A fool's errand. Anybody would know that. Now, what is currently going on? You have the prime minister of the UK now trying to get Donald Trump to agree that the peace agreement will also include the United States military staying in the region. And the reason for that is because the US essentially for ever since World War II, I think, is when you see the large growth of the US military complex. After World War II, the US has about 800 military bases throughout the world. It is the largest colonial power the world has ever seen since Great Britain, and it can be argued probably even larger than Great Britain because the US is in almost every single country in the United States, also uses the media to what they call like soft power, soft colonization, to then push like US goals, US ideals, which is the reason why you have such high immigration in the United States, because the US has great PR. The American dream, unfortunately, while it's not real, it is very much believed to be real. This idea that the US is a meritocracy, we're seeing all of that facade crumble now. Now, what is currently going on, the EU now is frightened of Russia and trying to get the US, their longtime ally, to essentially say like, hey, are you guys going to keep your military here? You're going to keep doing this because England and France, while they do have a military, it is a fraction of the size of the United States. One of the things that goes unsaid with why the EU, I would say keeping England out of it. England is actually quite a poor country. London is very rich. The country of England is wildly very poor. The EU itself, the reason why they're able to have 8 weeks of paid vacation, they have universal health care in all of these countries. Why in the Nordic countries, you're able to have up to 1 year of maternal leave after you have a child, all of these various social structures. One of the reasons for that is longstanding colonization. They are getting their minerals, they are getting any type of like base sustenance or things that they need at very cheap, purposely cheap prices from the continent of Africa as well as Southeast Asia, because through this version of colonization, they are not paying people. They're essentially stealing it. And then in terms of protection, the United States has stepped in and stated like, okay, well, the United States is functioning on white supremacist powers. So of course, the United States has a vested interest in protecting the EU. And so that has gone on for the better part of 4 or 5 decades. And with Trump now, we're seeing a realigning of that, because Trump now is trying to basically position the United States with other dictatorships, such as Russia. I think we may see his stance on China change, which is like going to be very fascinating. And so we are currently now watching the EU and the UK try to bargain with Trump in order to save Ukraine and essentially in order to save themselves. So, a bust of Winston Churchill will gaze at Keir Starmer on Thursday as he executes one of the trickiest visits by a prime minister with a U.S. president since the days of the great World War II leader. So they will be meeting today. It's 10:24, so maybe like, I don't know what time it is, but probably this afternoon. Starmer has a critical mission in the Oval Office to peel Donald Trump away from Russian President Vladimir Putin to extract security guarantees for Ukraine following an eventual peace deal and to save the transatlantic alliance. Spoiler alert, I don't think he's going to succeed on those things. His chances of success seem slim. French President Emmanuel Macron visited Washington on a similar quest on Monday, and despite rekindling his bromance with Trump, got no complete assurances. The task before the more taciturn Starmer became even more complex as he flew over the Atlantic on Wednesday. Trump, in his first cabinet meeting of his new term, dismissed the idea of robust U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine that Starmer sees as vital to ensuring that any peace agreement can endure. This is allegedly what Trump said in that cabinet meeting. The cabinet meeting, which you've probably seen pictures of now, where Elon Musk, who is not a member of the cabinet, he's just standing there talking, even though he's not supposed to be in the room. He does not have the clearance to be in that room. Anyways, this is what Trump stated in the cabinet meeting. I'm not going to make security guarantees beyond very much. We're going to have Europe do that. Europe is their next door neighbor, aka why should the US continue to pay for this? But on his plane, Starmer argued that a peace agreement would not be viable without such a US pledge. I'm absolutely convinced that we need a lasting peace, not a ceasefire, and for that to happen, we need security guarantees. The article then goes on to state that one of the things that Donald Trump and his current team, what they're looking for is they want access to Ukraine's minerals. And not only do they want access, they also want to be paid a portion of the proceeds of whatever Ukraine is selling from said minerals. It is very fascinating to see because, morning, y'all. Oh, let me make sure I see these things. It's fascinating to see because on one end, siding with the imperial powers, sorry, I'm a bit sick if you're just tuning in. Siding with the imperial powers is foolish and a fool's errand. And it's also interesting to see that one of the main tenets, I would say, in fears of general American history that is taught like in school in the United States is, oh, the United States is a democracy. The United States is spreading democracy everywhere. The United States is a colonizer. However, when you are taught in school here in history of the United States, look at the former USSR, look what they did. They colonized vast regions of Asia and Eastern Europe. We cannot allow that to happen, etc. So we're seeing almost the opposite happen now. And we're seeing Europe's biggest fear is, what if Vladimir Putin does not stop at Ukraine? What happens if Vladimir Putin is like, you know what, let's go a little bit more west and more west? And while that is a valid fear, what does that mean in a country, in the United States, that has shown it has no problem with propping up other dictators? Because the United States has propped up dictators in Central America, South America, the continent of Africa. Anytime, particularly in the continent of Africa and Central and South America, anytime there has been a democratically elected leader that did not agree with what the United States wanted to do, aka, if you look at Jamaica, for example, Jamaica is a tiny island nation. Jamaica was running on democratic socialism. The United States didn't like that. In the 70s, they were like, we need you, tiny country of 2.8 million people. It's a tiny little place, 2.8 million people. We need you to buy U.S. products. We need you specifically to buy U.S. milk because we need to prop up this dairy industry that actually doesn't make any money. Jamaica refused. They flooded Jamaica in the 70s, the CIA did, with semi-automatic weapons, with various types of guns and machinery, and that destabilized the country. The United States does that in various countries all the time. So while Europe does have a valid concern of like, hey, what's going to happen? Y'all are supposed to be the military. I'm not exactly going to cry for Europe. But also turning a blind eye while we are in the heart of empire is also not helpful, for what it's worth. This is going to be a conundrum, and I think it's going to be something that we have to continue to look into. The United States is rarely on the right side of history after World War II. Even during World War II, there was a lot more the United States could have done to help people that they just refused to do. Just refused to do because it was not in the United States' best interest. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Same with Haiti, to JoJo's Adventurous point. Yes, the majority of the Caribbean, Grenada, the United States invaded Grenada in the 80s. Wild. Poor tiny little Grenada. The United States was like, yeah, we're going to invade because we think communism is there. Nothing was there but a democratically elected leader who was like, we can be self-sustaining. Like, what do we need the US for? So it's definitely going to be interesting. I'm just going to read these comments, and then we're going to move forward. Russia is pushing back against Ukraine and NATO because they are encroaching on Russia's land. So this is from Kayla, and arguably part of Ukraine. Crimea, pardon the spelling, which is also interesting what they are fighting over. And it's also interesting to see the various types of imperialism, because we have, to Fran's point, we have US imperialism, Russian imperialism, Chinese imperialism. It is all imperialism. Like, saying that the United States is somehow better than the others is laughable. And I think people are beginning to see that. So, all right. Let us continue. I think when Julesy comes back, this is something that we'll do like a more thorough deep dive into, to understand like the role of NATO, and then we can go through that, and then to see, maybe to pull up some of the geopolitics and to see like how's this going to affect everybody. Interestingly enough, for all of a fascinating person, despite who she decided to work for and despite her political beliefs, Condoleezza Rice speaks Russian, has, I believe, like 2 degrees specifically in Russian geopolitics, and that was like her area of expertise. A fascinating, problematic lady. Very interesting. But yes. Yes, we can definitely do that. It would be cool if y'all did some sessions focused on American foreign policy. Yes, because I think it's very, hopefully it's very sorry. So, you know, when you're sick and your brain is moving so slow, hopefully it's very apparent. I was like, what is the damn word I'm looking for? Hopefully it's very apparent as you're watching this. Both of us, and since it's just me today, are very critical of American foreign policy, because American foreign policy is simply colonization, neocolonialism, which is what people call it now. It's the same thing. It is capitalism on steroids. It is the United States inserting itself into places that do not want the United States there, and are coerced and do not have the ability to say no. So, to say one more thing before we move on, the Philippines right now, run by their own dictator, Duarte, is very frightening. Unfortunately, the Philippines, in order to get more aid from the United States, has basically entered into agreements with the United States stating they can build more military bases in the Philippines. That is not good for the Filipino people. That is not the Filipino people asked for it, but that is what the current administration in the Philippines has realized, like, wait, that will give me more money, etc. And they are unfortunately going to be taken on a very wild ride. Most of the US military bases are not because people wanted them in those countries. It's because the US has either forcibly put them there or coerced their way with the puppet governments in place into putting them there. All right, let us continue on. Thank you, Aisha. Yes, if you haven't already, go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you're on Twitch, go ahead and subscribe as well. Appreciate y'all. Okay, what do we have next? Let me see the order we're in. Okay, let's talk about the unelected billionaire who seems to be everywhere. Okay. Make this a little bigger. Where are we at? Okay, here we are. Just close these ones out really quick. I think I'm missing one, but that's fine. Okay. This is from AP News. Nearly 40% of contracts canceled by Musk's unsolicited, illegal, faux department called Doge are expected to produce no savings. And I think this is important because I have been seeing, I think it's important to assess like whether or not we're in an echo chamber. So I do try to poke around on the internet without engaging, because why raise your blood pressure? But to see like what people are saying. In real life, I don't know anyone who believes in this dictatorial power grab by Elon Musk or Donald Trump. So I'm not sure how you would convince said people that, hey, that's not true. Like, that's nonsense. I think one of the ways, though, is by statistics and by facts. And I have been seeing people online showing these diehard believers like, hey, what are you talking about? Like, this is basic math. Okay, so this is by Ryan Foley from 2 days ago. So nearly 40% of the federal contracts that President Donald Trump's administration claims to have canceled as part of its signature cost-cutting program, they are allegedly trying to cut costs of $1 trillion in the government. We will not have a functioning government because they're cutting, for example, I think maybe last week we talked about this. They cut all of the park rangers that were on probation. So probation doesn't mean you did anything bad in terms of the government. It's just the status you get assigned until you become like a full-time employee. Like you're a full-time employee, but they put you on probation for a certain amount of time, and then you join the union after a year. So the federal workers that have been laid off were just recently hired federal workers because it's easier to fire them. That does not mean that their job is not needed. That does not mean that they have any type of performance issues. It just means that they are recently hired. So that is why they are going about firing them. The park services is one area where they cut these people. And that is an easy one to assess. Like, that's very dangerous. If you've ever been hiking, you need the park services there, one, in case you get lost. Shout out to the park services for the maps, for explaining to people that, aren't the best with maps of like, hey, if you get lost, is how you need to go and find things. We have one of the best national park systems in the world. Surprisingly, one of the things America does very well is keep up the national parks. It's because of park services. Without those people, you cannot have the parks open because it's dangerous. I went to the Grand Canyon for the first time last year, and every time I go on the West Coast, I'm always surprised by like, oh wow, there's no railing. And personally, because I'm afraid of heights, I'm like, don't y'all think we need railing? But they explain to you like, hey, don't go past a certain limit if you're uncomfortable because there's no railing. Like, you shouldn't be doing certain things. You need these people in these jobs. Some of these people have also been fired and rehired. Everybody on the nuclear team was fired. Who is going to run that program besides the people that actually have the PhDs to run the program? They had to rehire them. So this article is basically stating that Elon Musk's illegal alleged Department of Doge has put out propaganda Excel spreadsheets. They're not done very well. Anybody that even has a baseline level of math can look at it and realize like, wait, this is not correct. If I am checking your math and I see that your math is wrong, there's a problem because I'm not good at math. And in that, they're realizing and they're seeing that some of these contracts have already been paid out. So essentially, if you sign a multi-year deal, so say we sign a multi-year deal to pay out for, well, we're talking about park services, for park services. So we're going to pay, our multi-year deal is $1 million, and that's $1 million over 4 years. And that is to ensure that we're cleaning the brush so we don't have brush fires with global warming increasing because humans are really a pariah. We are having more fires as we have seen. So we're using that $1 million to clean up the brush so we can have less brush fires. We're using that to make sure there's water in these places. So that way, you have access to water while you're hiking. We're using that for search and rescue in case you get lost. That's what the $1 million over 4 years is for. Essentially, what Doge has done is they're cutting that $1 million and they're saying, see, we saved $1 million. When really, if you look at the contract, they're on year 4 of the contract. The entirety of the $1 million has already been paid out. They're saving no money. They're just canceling things because, again, Elon Musk and his team, they have no qualifications for this. This is not an actual exercise of where is the bloat. Because if we were going through where is the bloat is sitting, the majority of it, in one glaring department, which is the Ministry of War, which is what it used to be called, which is the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense has failed their audit for the past 5 to 7 years. They magically misplace billions of dollars. A lot of the magically misplaced billions of dollars is spent on arms and weaponry that they do not actually want to earmark. And a lot of that has actually ended up in Ukraine, has ended up in Israel, etc. So from the article, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is again an illegal, unsanctioned department run by Trump's advisor Elon Musk, published an updated list on Monday of nearly 2,300 contracts that agencies terminated in recent weeks across the federal government. Data published on Doge's wall of receipts. First of all, to take Whitney Houston's famous saying of "show me the receipts" and make it into this, rude, gross, very cheesy, shows that more than 1/3 of the contract cancellations, 794 in all, are expected to yield no savings. That's usually because the total value of the contracts has already been fully obligated, which means the government has a legal requirement to spend the funds for the goods or services it purchased, and in many cases has already done so. One of the things that they are basically trying to do is they don't want the government to function. So if you are trying to remake a country that was a democracy into a full dictatorship, you cannot have a functioning government, because a functioning government has checks and balances. By getting rid of all of these government contracts, government agencies, by basically rendering the agency itself inoperable, then the agency cannot work. Department of Education is a good example. There has been talk for the past year of, wow, Trump and this right-wing Republican administration will try to get rid of the Department of Education. Even if they don't close down the entire department, if they fire everyone in the department cannot run. It will not work. When you have an uneducated populace, it is easier to sell them lies. It is easier to say, go look at the wall of, what the hell, the wall of receipts. It doesn't even sound correct. There is nothing official about saying, go look at the wall of receipts and see that we're saving you money. Only a fool would believe something called the wall of receipts. The wall of receipts sounds like something that you would make up in your 8th grade burn book. Of, yes, look at all the receipts I have, all the gossip that we're doing because we are 14-year-old little girls. And yes, we did have one of those composition notebooks in 8th grade that we used to pass around. And thank God that I realized by 9th grade that I was going to go to law school, and I thoroughly disposed of it. The things you get into when you're a child, foolishness. But anyways, back to this. The entirety of this, and the reason why they want to do this, because they want to extract as much money as possible out of people. 70% of the GDP, the gross domestic product in the United States, it's very different from a lot of countries in that 70% of our GDP literally is consumer spending, is United States, US Americans spending money. If we do not spend money, they cannot make more money. There is no limit to their greed. And I think the more we accept that, unfortunately, there is no limit to their greed, the more you realize, like, that is why we have regulations. So people like this cannot fleece us for everything we are worth, which is very little. But collectively, there are 330 million people in this country. So if you fleece 330 million people, including the kids, which they are rolling back child labor laws, sending children to work in factories, you will get something. That is currently what they are doing. All right, let's look through some of these comments. I agree. The general apathy of the public concerns me, which is a good segue. I should have found an article. I didn't. But I will say this part before. Was this the last one? Oh, one more thing. We got to end with student loans. I'll say this before we end with student loans, which is tomorrow, February 28th, there is going to be a general boycott where people are encouraged to not spend any money. And I understand the apathy of people saying, that's one day. What is one day of no spending going to do? However, I would like to advocate for the fact that people need to see it to believe it. If you are on the fence of like, what is one day going to do? What is one day going to do to your pocket? You might as well save the money. You might as well try and see what happens when there are 330 million people in this country, but obviously that's including the kids, and the kids can't spend money they don't have. So let me give you a proper number. How many adults are in this country? Okay, according to census.gov. 258.3 million adults, people over 18, people with bank accounts, with a little cash, in this country. If even a fraction of those people do not spend money tomorrow, I think it will show people the power of the collective. We have lost the plot. And by we, I mean everybody up in this place, because rough and rugged individualist capitalism, that is the whole point of it. It's supposed to make you feel disconnected from others. It's supposed to make you feel like you don't have community. It's designed to force you to think like you pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you can do it all by yourself. It's not possible. It's never happened. It's not going to happen. It's designed for that. I think the power of tomorrow can be to remind people, wow, look, we all didn't spend money for one single day. Look, we hit the actual capitalists, the people that own things, because some people are aspiring capitalists and they don't have 2 cents to rub together. I don't know how that works. This is why we need education. It will remind the people that actually run things like, oh, wait, those 238, was that the number? 258, sorry. Those 258 million adults, they can actually cripple the wheels of commerce. And I think that's the positive of tomorrow. And that's the lesson I hope we all can relearn. It has been a very long time in this country since we've seen a collectivist movement that had positive impacts and did what it was supposed to do. BLM came close. BLM did push a lot of police departments to have cameras on. We then saw that the police didn't give a damn, so they were wearing it and then turning the cameras off. And we saw them circumvent that. But for a moment in time, we did see the actual answering of demands. We then saw a huge rave of racists be like, no, we're undoing all of this. We then saw Joseph Robinette Biden lie and run on a pulled back investment into policing, and then get into office the next week and be like, no, give them more money. We need more problems. We did see that. However, I think because we haven't seen a full out, yes, we have one legislatively, we have one in the street since the 1960s with the 1964 Civil Rights Act and then the 1965 Immigration Act. Our generation, so that would be the generations of Gen X, millennials, and definitely Gen Z, need to see it for themselves. They need to see, okay, we didn't spend money for one day. That cost them $50 billion. What happens if we don't do it for a week? Things start small. So everybody, discouraging people from trying it. I think we should try it. I think we should try it. If anything, you save yourself some money. And hopefully that will then encourage, like, okay, what does a targeted boycott on Tesla look like? How do we bankrupt Elon Musk? That would be the next, in my opinion, logical step. Okay, there's a megalomaniac in charge. How do we get rid of the megalomaniac? Hit him in the pockets. I was never going to buy a Tesla. The car is ugly. And it also is blowing up in different places. But anyways, how do you boycott that? SpaceX is getting its funding from the government. How do we initiate enough lawsuits, boycotts, sit-in actions, other actions that I can't say on here because inciting a riot is a crime? Other actions to get his government contracts pulled, because I think it's really interesting that he is out here cutting government contracts when Elon Musk is the beneficiary of billions of dollars of government contracts. Fascinating. It's very fascinating to me. So on that note, I think we should try. And today is February 27th. The boycott is tomorrow, February 28th. Just buy your things today, and then tomorrow, save your money, and we can see what does the beginning of collectivism look like. And hopefully that can attack head on the apathy people feel. The more things stay the same or get worse, I think the more apathy people are likely to feel, because you feel that, oh, I can't change anything. I'm just one person. However, if you even get 20% of 258 million people to do something, you will see a huge change. You don't need everybody, but you do need a good 10 to 20% to move things, for what it's worth. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I have been seeing people be against it, and I'm like, it's just one day. It's really okay. It's also Friday. Make yourself a mimosa at home and relax yourself. Just relax yourself at home. It's very interesting, but I think we have to start pushing that and encouraging that. And if everyone tells 3 people, and those 3 people tell 3 people, we can see the beginnings. I would look at tomorrow as the beginnings of something. I know everybody wants to see like the big shebang, the big, like, wow, look at this big one. It has to start small. The Montgomery bus boycott started small. It didn't start out with, okay, we are not going to take the bus for a year. That was not the plan in the beginning. I don't think they, in Montgomery, Alabama, since I've been, beautiful place. When you talk to people and the civil rights were mostly won in the state of Alabama. When you talk to older Black people in Alabama, they literally are like, they will tell you, yeah, 1964 and in the 60s, you're starting to see all of our hard work come to fruition. But that actually started in the 1950s. And they had been going on for literally decades of being like, no, I'm tired. I'm not doing this. And enough encouraging each other. And because we don't give the proper respect to history, I think we have largely lost that history of, we have to start somewhere. And let's start with the one day tomorrow. And then hopefully you can build it out to some long-term sustained actions. So, all right. Listen, I'm trying to say it as nicely as possible. I'm trying to say it as nicely as possible. Okay. It's going to take some time. Let's start with the one day. And also, I think I said this maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe on my channel, something else, which is, if you know your neighbor, part of like being in communities, being a good community member, if you know your neighbor cannot go to the grocery store today because you're like, oh, Miss Jackson works overnights at the hospital, she can't go to the grocery store. It doesn't cost so much to you to be like, hey, I made XYZ for myself. Do you want some? And I think rebuilding community has to do with like talking to people. Now, if your neighbor is a racist MAGA supporter, I wouldn't bother with that. However, we do have to help each other. And by each other, I mean, those of us that Eric Adams is calling Negroes. All right, let's continue. Well, I think we're on to the last one now. Okay. Ending with this, which, because I am affected by it and I have been paying so much attention to it over the past 5 years, I have too many feelings. But I do think, in having been on the student loan journey for 5 years, it has encouraged me to basically like read through the fluff. So a lot of mainstream media is designed to basically get your heart rate up, raise your blood pressure, piss you off, because unfortunately journalism has been hijacked and it has turned into like people are getting paid by advertisers. Like, for example, we're on the Forbes. Look, there's an ad right here. They're getting paid by advertisers, so they're trying to get as much clicks as possible. And I start with that because we are going to see a wild amount of news around student loans, and particularly around Trump and the unsanctioned department that is Doge, trying to get their lick back from the 45 million, I believe it is, Americans that owe student loans for simply wanting to get education. I would say, if you have student loans, take a deep breath and always read through the entirety of the article and read through the subtext of what they're saying. So essentially what is going on right now is the Department of Education takes down key student loan forgiveness and repayment applications. So a little background on what has gotten us here in regard to student loans. One, our education system is one of the most expensive in the world for no reason. They have decided that you can get exorbitant amounts of money off of education, and they have capitalized on our education system, which is why people like Joseph Robinette Biden, even Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, anybody over the age of 50 years old, how much it costs for them to go to college versus a millennial who's in their 30s, night and day. The cost of education has risen over 150% for no reason, because capitalism infects everything. And they've realized, like, if we make education a requirement instead of a necessity of our population, we can charge so much money and we can make so much money. Never forget that Trump himself had a university, a for-profit university, that he was sued for, and he had to pay out because he was basically thieving people's money. Yes. He was found liable for that and had to pay out all those students. It became and has become very profitable. With that, you see the rise of student loan debt because most people cannot afford to send their kids, much less themselves, to go to college, much less grad school, for free. It's not happening. So you have all of these people that owe student loans. Now, I brought this up, I think, last time, and which is why I said take a deep breath because it is a little frightening. During the pandemic, and this actually started under Trump, and then it was ushered into with Joseph Biden as well, which is we had a pause on our student loans. That is the first time that has ever occurred. The pause on student loans occurred because during the pandemic, they're like, oh, damn, y'all really can't pay this. Here in the United States, we're all in the United States, sorry. Here, not we're all in the United States, but in context of the student loans, here in New York, it was so bad where unfortunately they were putting people who had recently passed away into Central Park in refrigerated containers. That's how frightening the situation was. I don't think we've taken a hard look at the effects of the pandemic because we've been going through so many catastrophes so often that we have not been able to process that, in my opinion. And I think that's going to bite all of us in the ass for what it's worth. I say that to say, when we had the pause on student loans, it was unprecedented. It had never happened. Not only did you get a break from having to pay your student loans, there also was no interest. The no interest was the biggest factor of the student loan pause because the interest is what is really mollywopping people. For example, of my student loans that I borrowed for undergrad and law school, I only owe law school left. $90,000 is interest, is money I did not borrow. During the pandemic and during the subsequent student loan debt freeze, student loan payment freeze, I have not had to pay additional interest. I did the math. It's about like $10,000 to $12,000 a year in additional interest I would have had to pay. It's been 4 years. That would have been an additional $40K. Well, actually, we're in 2025 now. So actually, it's probably like $50K of additional money. It's not money I borrowed, of additional money I have had not to pay. All of that background is necessary because then it will put into mind as to why they are so adamantly going after people that have student loans. They want their money back. They want their money back hook and crook any way that they can because, again, they have made education, which should be a human right and should be free to everyone. They have made education for profit. They have made it something that they can extract money out of. They have lost money that they really weren't entitled to in the first place by giving us student loan forbearance and putting a pause on student loans during the only pandemic that has existed in the past 100 years. What are we, 2025? Spanish influenza, I think, was the early 20s. So I think that statement still stands. Global pandemic. So what they are doing now, let me make this a little bit bigger, is we have income-driven repayment plans. Income-driven repayment takes into account how much money you pay based on your income as well as how many people are in your household. And income-driven repayment is helpful because it lowers your monthly payment. However, I stand by the fact that math is math. It's negative in that if you pay less per month, you still owe the base amount. The interest will grow over time. But again, because we are in this system where so many of us have been coerced and forced into various debts just to survive, you need the lower monthly payment so that way every month you're not drowning. Income-driven repayment also has consolidated loans. So consolidated loans means you take, I have a chart. It's on my, because I'm paying them off, on my wall. I always forget if it's 21 or 22. 21. I had 21 loans from undergrad and grad for law school. It's only because in undergrad, for some odd reason, they give you like very small loans, like a bunch of them every semester. And I'm like, y'all could have made a larger one, but okay. A consolidated loan is a requirement for PSLF, Public Service Loans Forgiveness. So essentially, if I worked in the public sector to get PSLF and get my loans forgiven after 10 years of working in the public sector, I would have to consolidate those 21 loans into one large loan. And then I would make the minimum payments required based on my income. And then the interest would continue to grow, but after 10 years, the promise is, okay, I've given 10 years to service of others, they are going to wipe out those loans. PSLF as a program had lots of issues because it was never actually instituted properly. The one decent thing that Joseph Robinette Biden and his Department of Education did was correct the administrative issues of PSLF. So you saw a rise of people who had been working for the government 15, 20 years, working at nonprofits, teachers, etc., public lawyers, public defenders, finally getting their loans forgiven, even though it was owed to them a decade prior. What the Trump administration is now currently doing is, one, they are getting rid of income-driven repayment. So anybody that is trying to say like, hey, I know I owe $60K for undergrad because the cost of education is ridiculous. I only make, as a recent grad, $45K. Can we take that into account? Instead of them paying under income-driven repayment, like probably $150, $200 a month, they want to push everyone back into $600, $700. My original payment that I was supposed to pay when I graduated law school, I believe was upward of $2,000. And I laughed. I remember laughing, being like, well, I know I'm a lawyer. I know I passed the bar on the first try. I know I'm smart. I also see that this salary is not covering that. So I've been on income-driven repayment this whole time. I give them large amounts of money because I'm trying to get rid of it. However, if I was to be beholden to a minimum, that would give me lots of anxiety. They're also getting rid of consolidating loans. The reason why they're getting rid of consolidating loans, which is unfortunate and disgusting in my opinion, is I think they want to attack PSLF. If you cannot consolidate your loan, you are not allowed to, under the current rules, apply for PSLF. It is a requirement for public service loan forgiveness to consolidate your loans. Now, there is, again, this is why you got to read the whole article. There is positives here. One, even though they have taken that away on the Department of Education website, so if you are going to be graduating this year, this is who it's going to apply to, you can still fill out the paper application. They haven't removed the paper application, and that is because the unsanctioned, unsolicited, illegal department that is DOJ is not thorough. They don't know what they're doing. They're going to cause this consternation to basically just bother people and rile people up. I don't think that it will stand as it is. For everyone that is already on income-driven repayment, such as myself, if you're on the SAVE plan, for example, everybody on the SAVE plan is still in forbearance because the SAVE plan is currently being litigated in court. An appellate court just struck it down, but a district court has to actually produce a ruling for that. Our court system is slow. It's going to take them, it's February. Well, actually, it's basically March. Maybe June. They're extremely slow. And because they're slow and because there's so much bureaucracy and because we have literal unqualified fools running the place, if you take a deep breath, I think we have at least till the end of the year to make the most of the income-driven repayment plan. There is no way that they are going to effectively be able to go in and switch. There are 8 million people on the SAVE plan. In all of income-driven repayment, maybe double, maybe 16, 20 million people. They're not going to be able to administratively do all of that because what have they done? They are starting to fire all of the people in these departments. Who's going to run it? Who is going to contact all of these various student loan service providers, which student loan service providers, those are third parties. They also, during the pandemic, because they weren't receiving payments, they also downsized. So I have AidVantage. AidVantage doesn't even have a mobile app. Raggedy. And they had one, and they basically, I found an email because I was like, why don't y'all have a mobile app? Like, it's 2025. Why do I have to log in on the website? And they basically said they couldn't keep up the app, so they don't have one. So I think when it comes to student loans, the best thing you can do for yourself, if you can find some extra money and as close as possible to paying it off, will protect you in the long run, because what they are trying to do to people that have student loans, they're also proposing additional tax for people that have student loans, which is wild. Like, we're already paying education tax because why was school so expensive to begin with? The closer you can get to not having them, the less burden you'll have in the long run. So I would take it all with a grain of salt when you see all these articles coming out about the student loans, because it's designed to raise your blood pressure. It's designed to raise your blood pressure and to get you in a place of basically like where you feel destitute. All right. Let me go read these comments. And then, yes, I agree, Angela, because that's how I feel. Our higher education system is modern day indentured servitude. It's very, very wild. Very wild. Oh, we need to do how to build community training for introverts and shy girls, LOL. Listen, I will defer to the introverts. As y'all can tell, I clearly talk too much. I'm clearly very extroverted. I will say it's funny because most extroverts have I have a lot of introvert friends. I feel like it's always like a good pairing. So maybe all of the extroverts need to go help the introverts. I feel like that's usually how it's worked in my life. All right. Simone, I don't even get the move for getting rid of IDR, which is income driven repayment. Lower monthly payment means it takes longer to pay your loan, which then allows for more interest to accumulate, right? Yes, correct. Hiking it just means you really aren't going to get any payments unless No, this is exactly correct. And it's interesting because that's what I was thinking. So back to math is math. If you pay the lower monthly payment, your interest, it just grows. That's the insidious part of student loans. My highest remaining, sorry, let me take the mic. My highest remaining student loan balance, because it's on the wall, 7.21%. Wild. Wild. I had a Sally Mae student loan, a bar study loan that was 10%. That was like one of the first ones, the first batch I paid off. Because I was like, how dare you, Sally Mae? This is wild. I think their end goal, if I put on my, like, let's think like a diabolical South African apartheid's favorite son, billionaire who wants to be a trillionaire and just hates humanity. I think their end goal with getting rid of income driven repayment is default. So without income driven repayment, they automatically put you on a 10-year repayment plan. The 10-year automatic repayment plan, most people cannot afford. It is expensive, super expensive. That also should then lead to the fact that, like, education is ridiculously priced, because why should it be taking us more than 10 years to pay it off? Anyways, I think they want people to default on the loan, because if we default on the loan, it would go to collections and we're still going to pay it. Someone is still going to get paid off. That's what I think they want. Student loans insidiously are one of the few debts that do not get discharged in bankruptcy. Student loans basically are forever. They're forever. One of the things that I think initially they were targeting, in income-driven repayment is the original income-driven repayment plans had a clause. The clause was new because, again, this phenomenon of student loans is new. That stated, if you make all of your payments for 25 years, we will forgive the loan. Do you know how much money they will fleece out of you in 25 years? They want to get rid of that. So specifically, the states that sued, they sued to get this SAVE plan canceled, because the SAVE plan had a clause in it that said after 10 years of repayment, if the original principal balance, I don't remember the number, so I'm not going to lie. It was something low. It was something that I laughed at. I was like, whose original principal balance is this low? I think it was 5K. Let's just say 3K. It was something very, very low. I was like, child, this is one of my college loans. Like, this is nothing. If the original principal balance was less than 3K, after 10 years, you paying towards the 3K, they would forgive the loan. The reason why and this was under the Biden administration, I was always against that, because if you've been paying off a 3K loan for 10 years, you have clearly paid more than 3K. You've paid back a lot, because, again, the interest is growing. The interest rates are set by Congress, and they have currently, I think they're hovering between 7 and 8% now. I don't think they've changed much from since I've graduated, at least hopefully not, because 7.21% is objectively wild. They are trying to get as much money out of people as possible, and if they can't, they will send you to collections so somebody else will get the money out of you. But that is a great point, Simone. Crazy. Objectively wild. Yes, and to Gardenia and Bloom's point, Black women disproportionately hit. Yes. The most educated demographic in this country is Black women. Yay. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of me. I'm proud of all of us. And the most indebted demographic in this country is Black women. I hate that for us. It's trifling. It then ties you and locks you into places that maybe you've outgrown, maybe treat you bad, maybe harass you. Maybe you're facing discrimination, but you cannot leave because the debt. That was a big reason why I stayed in corporate for so long. And then I finally was like, child, I'm tired. I am now transparently like, oh, I need to build a bridge and get over it because I need to pay these off. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of where we're at. And I don't say any of this to discourage people from going to school. I think education is necessary. Education is a beautiful thing. And look for all the grants available. Look for all of the money available, and do it that way. And then also there are various like planning methods. I haven't done it myself, but it's something that I wonder in hindsight if I would have done. I had friends where they did their education abroad, and it was cheaper. It was cheaper for them to literally move to get a significantly reduced education cost, reduced in cost, same in terms of substance, in another country. So that is also an option. So I say all of that to say, check out the price tag before you sign yourself up for the price tag. Because if I would have known some things, I don't know if I would have gone. I'm not gonna lie. Or maybe I would have like taken some time off and saved up some money so that I could have borrowed less. I think that is something that is very probably a lot more helpful, because the less you borrow up front, the less you will owe. Because again, it's the interest and the base cost. Also, look into state schools versus private schools. I went to Brooklyn Law School. Brooklyn Law School is a private school. Brooklyn Law School, $70,000 a year. It's 3 years long of school. It's expensive. A state school, significantly cheaper. CUNY Law, City University of New York, costs a lot less than NYU, Columbia, Brooklyn Law School, etc. Great education. When I worked in corporate, I was like, oh, any of my colleagues and friends that went to public universities, public law schools, I was like, yeah, the debt is less. That's so much smarter because we're in the same field. We're in the same job now. And I know you owe less than I do. Excellent. I went to public for undergrad. So that's why undergrad I didn't pay much and I had a scholarship. But if you're looking to do, I would say, a graduate program, definitely look at your state schools. And state schools, we'll see what happens under this administration with their funding. But similarly robust programs. So on that note, well, we got through the hour. Thank you for suffering through my technological difficulties. I will, this is a funny question. Just to address. What happens to your loans if you move abroad permanently? There are articles, I probably shouldn't mention them. Don't read them. I'm not a proponent of it, but there are articles of people who basically are doing student loan evasion by moving. I don't know how that would play out in the long term, to be honest. And why put yourself in a situation where you can't come back to see your family and friends? For what it's worth, the loans are still there. But I appreciate y'all, and I will see y'all. Hopefully I won't be sick. I'll see y'all on Monday, and then Julesy will be back, not this Monday, but the following Monday. So appreciate y'all as always. Hope y'all have a good almost weekend. If you can, and you can do it. Tomorrow, just don't buy anything, and encourage 3 people around you not to buy anything for the hopes of it starting a larger movement. I think that it should be and is a lot of hopefulness. We'll take one day and we'll grow that out from there, and we'll see. And if you can, and if you're able, help your neighbor if you know that they can't, and help them with dinner or lunch or something. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all. I'll catch y'all later. Also, there are a lot of great suggestions here about other programs you can attend abroad, University of West Indies, as well as master's programs in Europe. Thank you, Shalena, for this, about $2,000 to $3,000, probably 2,000 to 3,000 euros. So there are other options. Always appreciate the chat, since y'all always have such great insights and suggestions. So I will see y'all next week. Be well. All right. Bye.